Are you enjoying your weekend? That unhurried Saturday morning coffee, Sunday in the park, or simply the freedom of not punching a clock for 2 days in a row? It seems obvious, doesn't it? Almost a birthright. But what if I told you that your weekend isn't a natural right, but was invented, or rather won, by a woman you've probably never heard of, a woman that history has almost forgotten? But all of this didn't start in a boardroom with a peaceful agreement. It started here. On a tragic afternoon on March 25, 1911, in an inferno of flames and desperation. That day, a woman named Frances Perkins saw something unimaginable and decided that the world of work, as she knew it, had to end forever. This is the untold story of how a tragedy gave birth to the rights we all enjoy today. But who was this woman who would redesign work in America? Born in Boston in 1880, Fanny Corelli Perkins didn't seem destined for a life of battle. Raised in a middle-class family, she had an excellent education, but it was during her studies in sociology and economics that something clicked. Working in settlement houses like Hull House in Chicago, she saw with her own eyes the misery and exploitation of workers, especially young immigrant women. She quickly realized that to be taken seriously in a world of men, she had to change the rules of the game, starting with her name. She abandoned Fanny, too frivolous, and became Frances Perkins, a name that would soon become synonymous with tenacity. By the early 1910s, she was making a name for herself in New York as secretary of the Consumers League, fighting to reduce the work week to 54 hours and for safer factory conditions. She was already laying the groundwork for her mission, but she couldn't imagine that the event that would change her forever was just around the corner. March 25, 1911, a Saturday afternoon in New York. Frances Perkins is having tea with friends near Washington Square Park when the sound of sirens cuts through the air. They run toward the source of the chaos, the Ash Building. The top 3 floors house the Triangle Shirtwaist Company, a blouse factory. But it was no ordinary factory. It was a sweatshop, a hellscape where hundreds of young female workers, mostly Italian and Jewish immigrants between 14 and 23 years old, worked in inhumane conditions. That afternoon, shortly before closing time, a spark in a bin of fabric scraps started the nightmare. The flames, fueled by cotton and paper, erupted in an instant. Panic broke out. The girls ran for the exits, but the doors were locked, a common practice to prevent workers from taking breaks or stealing. They were trapped. There were no fire sprinkler systems. The only external fire escape collapsed under the weight of the people. The fire department's ladders barely reached the 6th floor, 2 stories below the inferno. Frances Perkins arrived and witnessed a scene that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Powerless, she watched dozens of girls appear on the ledges, their clothes on fire, facing a terrible choice: burn to death or throw themselves into the void. One after another, they began to jump. 47 leaped from the windows, sometimes holding hands, crashing onto the street below. In less than half an hour, the fire was out. The toll was devastating: 146 dead. 123 were women and girls. 23 were men. The owners, Max Blank and Isaac Harris, escaped and, incredibly, collected a handsome insurance payout. About $400 for every life lost. Much more than the $75 in compensation that would later be paid to some families. Years later, Perkins would say that was the day the New Deal began. Her mission had become crystal clear. The trauma of that day transformed into a steely determination. Driven by public outrage, Frances Perkins became the driving force for reform. On the advice of Theodore Roosevelt, she became the chief investigator of the New York State Factory Investigating Commission. Alongside future political giants like Robert Wagner and Al Smith, Perkins led an unprecedented investigation. She inspected thousands of factories, documenting fire hazards, appalling sanitary conditions, and rampant exploitation. Her court testimonies became legendary because she didn't just stick to data, she told the stories of the people, giving a human face to the tragedy. The result? The most extensive series of workplace safety laws ever seen in America. Nearly 40 new regulations were passed, introducing mandatory fire sprinklers, safety exits, limits on working hours for women and children, and, for the first time, a workers' compensation system. New York State became a model for the nation, and Frances Perkins was its architect. Her reputation caught the attention of a rising political star, Franklin D. Roosevelt. When Roosevelt became governor of New York, he appointed her head of the Department of Labor. And when he won the presidential election in 1933 in the midst of the Great Depression, he made a choice that stunned everyone. He named Frances Perkins Secretary of Labor, the first woman ever in a U.S. presidential cabinet. She accepted, but on one condition. She presented Roosevelt with a non-negotiable list of priorities, a program that at the time seemed like pure utopia. And over the next 12 years, one by one, she turned those dreams into law. Her approach was brilliant. Instead of getting lost in technicalities, she tackled real problems with concrete solutions. She looked at the relentless cycle of 10 to 12-hour workdays, 7 days a week, and answered with the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. This law didn't just establish a federal minimum wage. It created the 40-hour work week and mandated that any extra hour be paid as overtime. With a single move, Frances Perkins had officially invented the American weekend. She saw the pervasive fear of a penniless old age and the terror of unemployment that left families on the street. Her solution was the Social Security Act of 1935, a revolutionary idea that built a national pension system for the elderly, unemployment insurance, and aid for the disabled and needy families. A safety net that simply did not exist before. She witnessed the tragedy of childhoods stolen by the grime of mines and the din of factories. Her solution was the nationwide abolition of child labor, another pillar of the Fair Labor Standards Act. And to empower the lone worker against the powerful employer, she championed the Wagner Act, which protected the right of workers to organize into unions and bargain for a better life. These weren't just laws. They were the foundations of a more just society. From the ashes of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, Frances Perkins had rebuilt the American world of work. Look around you today. The pension your grandparents receive? That's the legacy of Frances Perkins. The ban that prevents a child from working in a factory? That's Frances Perkins. And yes, that Friday afternoon, when you close your computer and get ready for 2 days of freedom, that's Frances Perkins too. Her reforms have become such a part of our lives that we take them for granted, like the air we breathe. But they were the fruit of sweat, battles, and the determination of a woman who dared to challenge the status quo. She faced hostility from industrialists, politicians, and a society that was not ready to see a woman with so much power. But she never ever gave up. That was Frances Perkins, not just the first woman in the presidential cabinet, but the silent architect of our free time and our security. A monumental figure that history has unfairly overshadowed. The next time you enjoy your weekend, think of her. Think of the girls from the Triangle Factory and the fact that their death was not in vain. Thanks to a woman who turned her pain into a crusade, their sacrifice lit a light that still shines on us today. Which of these reforms that we take for granted today surprised you the most to discover? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more stories that have shaped our world, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching.